Hi, my name is Ryan, and my public policy topic is breastfeeding. A lot of people know that breastfeeding is pretty encouraged for new mothers, that it's very healthy for both the mom and the baby, but a lot of people don't know that it can also have a lot of beneficial effects to the community as well. A lot of statistical data shows that breastfeeding dramatically reduces the risk for asthma, diabetes, obesity, allergic diseases, and even lowers the risk of sudden infant death syndrome. Because breastfeeding milk is so much more nutritious than formula or other forms to feed babies, there's a lot of more antibodies in there, which helps create an immunity to different diseases for the nursing baby as well. For the mother, it increases her metabolism, makes it faster, which helps her return to that pre-pregnancy weight a lot quicker after she births the baby. It also helps reduce stress and is shown to decrease the risk for postpartum depression in many women. The early skin-to-skin contact and suckling has a lot of emotional benefits and is shown to just have a healthier relationship between the mother and the baby and create that bond a lot sooner. It also lowers the risk for breast and ovarian cancer for the mother later in life. For many families, if you buy formula, it can get really expensive, all the bottles and buying formula all the time. So for the community, it can have a lot of economical and environmental benefits in the fact that breastfeeding saves family money, and it also saves a lot of waste products from going back out into the environment if you're not buying formula and buying the plastic bottles. Traditionally, breastfeeding has always been around. It's been in all of recorded history just because for most of mankind it was the only way that women could feed their children. Many times, if the mother had died or if for some reason she couldn't breastfeed, there were these things called wet nurses, who were basically women who would breastfeed other people's children so that they could survive and they could have nutrition and be healthy babies. By the 15th century, people started to get the idea that, hey, maybe we should try to replace breastfeeding, or maybe we should try to find something to kind of supplement for it. And so they tried giving babies cow and goat milk, but it wasn't successful because the cow and the goat milk did not have the type of nutrients that the infants needed. By the 18th century, people tried to mix flour and cereal and broth together to create kind of the first experiment of formula, but it also wasn't successful because it didn't have the nutrients in it either. And it wasn't until the 19th century, or the mid-1800s, that the first successful formula was developed and patented. During the turn of the 20th century, after the development of formula, there became this stigma or different kind of thinking that the higher class women, the more wealthier women, used formula because they could afford to buy it, because they could afford to buy the formula and the bottles and everything that would go with it, and that the women who breastfed were lower class or uncultured because they didn't have enough money, or they didn't have a good enough job, or they weren't supported well enough by their husbands to be able to buy formula. And so there really became this stigma that breastfeeding is bad and breastfeeding is not natural and it's not cultured, and it may have been good in the past, but it's not good now. And it wasn't until the 1960s that the women's rights movement brought back popularity and brought it back into the mainstream, really encouraging women by saying, hey, it's your body and it is natural, and you want to be able to support your child through what you can naturally give them. And it really kind of changed the mindset, or started to change the mindset of how breastfeeding was interpreted. Because of this popularity, in the 1970s, scientists decided, hey, maybe we should research this and actually see what the benefits are. In 1984, even though 61% of all babies were being breastfed at birth, there were a lot of restaurants and businesses who still had policies against breastfeeding in public, whether it be public indecency laws or just policies put in place by that particular restaurant or business, saying basically that women couldn't feed their babies in public because it was offensive to other people. It wasn't until 1990 that the World Health Organization and UNICEF partnered together to create the Innocenti Declaration, which is a global initiative or global goal to enact different legislators around the world to protect women's breastfeeding rights in public. It was created and co-sponsored by the United States and Sweden, and by the time that it was implemented, 30 countries signed it. As a part of the Innocenti Declaration, the Department of Human and Health Services created a blueprint, so to say, of action on breastfeeding. And this included education on why it was beneficial, training on the best techniques or the best ways to do it, promotion with women all over the country, and research on just continuing to find what the benefits were of it and health-wise, like why it was good for both the baby and the mother. Till this day, it's still the national plan and it's still in place, and it's the backbone of most of the breastfeeding policy change and promotion. In 2004, the first national breastfeeding awareness campaign was put into place by the Department of Health and Human Services Office of Women's Health, and its aim was to empower women to commit to breastfeeding. A lot of women, even though they started out breastfeeding right after birth, there was still this need to continue it on. So they would breastfeed right after they had the baby, but would quit 3 months after the baby was born or 6 months after the baby was born. And this awareness campaign not only wanted to promote women to breastfeed in the first place, it also wanted to promote them to continue breastfeeding. Their slogan was, "Babies are born to breastfeed." And by this time, 71% of all babies born in the United States started off breastfeeding. In March 2010, Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act, was put into place, and in that were a couple titles about breastfeeding. The first one was that employers were required to provide a break time to nursing or pumping mothers and a place to do so other than a bathroom. For most women, a bathroom is not an ideal place to pump or to breastfeed your baby. It's not super clean, it's not super comfortable, and it's just really not where you want to be feeding your baby. So it was really nice to have this policy in place where women could be provided with an area at their work to do that was more suitable and just more comfortable for the women. Though, because the employees were required to do that, they were not required to compensate the women for that break time. As of right now, 48 states allow women to breastfeed in public. South Dakota and Iowa do not. They still have it as a part of their public indecency laws or just policies against it. 29 states exempt breastfeeding from public indecency laws, so Oklahoma is included in that. 28 states have laws involving breastfeeding in the workplace, Oklahoma included, and 6 states have implemented or encouraged development of breastfeeding awareness and education campaigns. Oklahoma hasn't done that yet, but I'd say for the most part we're doing pretty good. One policy that I found really interesting and nice to have in place was Oklahoma specifically exempts nursing women from jury duty if they request it. So say a woman just had a baby and at the same time she also gets a jury duty thing in the mail. What a bummer. She can say, "Hey guys, I'm actually breastfeeding my baby, so I don't want to be on jury duty." And they have to say, "Okay, that's fine. You don't have to be on jury duty." So that's kind of nice for a woman to have, especially if she's not super comfortable breastfeeding in public or just needs to rest, The next one is that employers are required to provide a break time to nursing mothers. So this is included in the Affordable Care Act, but Oklahoma actually put it as a policy 4 years before that one was put in place in 2006. So good on us. The Department of Health is also required to make periodic reports on breastfeeding rates. So this is just to see how many women are breastfeeding in Oklahoma, how many women are continuing to breastfeed, and also how many women are getting information about it and education and promotion about breastfeeding. The last one is, in Oklahoma, mothers are pretty much allowed to breastfeed anywhere they want, as long as they're allowed to be in there. If they're backstage at a concert and they don't have a VIP pass, they probably can't breastfeed there, but anywhere else, they're totally fine. And I think that's cool of Oklahoma to have in place. So we talked a little bit about the Healthy People 2020 before in our class. So as of right now, in 2006, the most recent data is from 2006, that 74% of women do breastfeed their babies immediately after birth, but the goal is to reach 81.4% by 2020. They also want to increase the duration of breastfeeding. So like I mentioned earlier, a lot of women breastfeed initially, but stop at 3 months or stop at 6 months. And Healthy People 2020 wants to just make it a longer process, have breastfeeding for longer, because it is healthier. It is good for the baby. And then lastly, they want to increase employers who have lactation support programs in place. So this is not only having a place for women to breastfeed and not only having that break time, but also having, supportive people around that say, hey, we're totally cool with you breastfeeding here, and having education and having just a supportive community for those women at their workplace to where they feel comfortable that they can breastfeed. There are many websites now available for women who want to know more about breastfeeding. There's tons of educational articles. There's tons of articles on techniques on how to breastfeed and the best way to breastfeed. But there's also articles on how to deal with criticism, because even though it is so popular and there are so many women that do naturally breastfeed, at this point in our history, there is still a stigma on it from people. There's still this oh, that woman's boob is out in public to feed her baby. And there's still this kind of, I don't know if it's a misconception, but it's definitely just this way of thinking that's not awesome for women who do want to breastfeed their children. And so there's articles out there on how to deal with criticism from people, so that they just feel like they have that support. So here are my sources, if any of you guys are interested in going back and learning more about it. I found that last one, that A History of Influence article, to be super interesting. But that's it, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation.